Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I don't think at the moment that we'll be talking about John Bercow, largely because it seems to be a fairly pointless conversation. It's a bit like Brexit, but the other way around. People have been successfully conditioned into hating him, but they've got no idea why they are supposed to. My personal problem with the man is born of all the outstanding complaints about bullying, all of which he has, of course, denied, but none of which, it would seem, have been properly investigated. There's a biography waiting to be written there, though. Do you know he used to be in the Monday Club? He was a full-on, hard right-winger back in the day. I wonder if that's why the far right hate him so much, because he kind of shows that it is possible to see the light and change your mind, and they, of course, depend upon the notion that it's not. 4 minutes after 10 is the time. Why are they going to ban watches from all exams? I suspect if you're under 30, you can probably work that one out for yourself. And the police, are they in as dire straits as perhaps some critics suggest? The honours system is in the news today after Theresa May fulfilled quite gloriously her promise to scale back resignation honours. You'll remember that she was very critical of previous pronouncements in precisely this field and vowed before becoming Prime Minister that she would never emulate the likes of David Cameron by hanging out gongs like confetti when she finally shuffled out of Downing's. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, I'm talking complete twaddle. She's actually handed out more gongs than David Cameron did. In fact, it would appear to me it would have been impossible to enter Downing Street during Theresa May's premiership without now having been rewarded with some form of honour. And I would like to talk about honours a little later in the programme. I'd like to talk about them really honestly, with your help. And the real honesty comes from the fact that I personally find them absolutely ridiculous, right up to and not including the point where I kind of fantasise about having a seat in the House of Lords. Do you see what I mean? You should know. I mean, they're no more ridiculous now than they were then, when you could get, you get given half of Wiltshire just for having had a good day in the army. If you were an officer, if you were born into the ruling class and you had a good day at war, you come home and get Blenheim Palace. I mean, I'm being a little bit trivial. Winning wars is generally a good thing. I'd rather be on the winning side than the losing side. And obviously, not being a Brexiter, I subscribe to the idea that the armies we should be frightened of are not the armies we're actually in. But, you know, these are troubling times in so many ways. Well, I like it when sort of a lollipop lady gets an OBE, but I don't understand why people who worked at Downing Street get them. I mean, you know, that's a cushy job. Most people who do it with an eye on a very, very well-paid job in the private sector afterwards. The rewards are material. Some reputational damage might have been suffered, but you could be the single worst parliamentary prime ministerial advisor in the history of the human race and still get a column in the Daily Telegraph at the end of it. So I don't know. I don't like it. Don't ring me yet, Christine. Honestly, I haven't even started. That's not what we're talking about. We'll get on to that later. Is it cognitive dissonance at its most acute? And do we all find the honour system ridiculous? And apart from the very, very, very honourable exceptions who do actually turn it down. But if you turn it down and tell me, then I think that's almost as bad as accepting one. Because you're expecting to be praised and admired for reasons linked to the honour system, but just not with the actual honour. So if I had turned down an OBE in the last couple of years, I would not be able to tell you in order to sustain my own sense of integrity. So I'm not going to tell you whether or not I have turned down an OBE or indeed a knighthood in the last few years. I'm not going to tell you because that would completely undermine my belief that it's only valuable to turn them down if you never tell anyone. So I'm not telling you, and ever. See you in the House of Lords. 8 minutes after 10. We'll get on to that later in the programme. Right. Can we play a game this morning? I don't know about you. I found it quite refreshing yesterday when we talked about e-scooters. It was nice to take a sort of little detour away from the domestic political landscape, and we will do that on today's programme, I promise you, but not in the first hour, because, again, I find it astonishing that the pennies still aren't dropping on the scale that we expected them to have done so by now. I suspect that if they haven't dropped by now, they never will. I think that's probably a fair observation. But we had a caller yesterday who crystallised the entire mess of parliamentary politics at the moment People who voted to leave the European Union because they had been told that our parliament had leached or lost power. Remember, we need to control our laws. We need to have bring back power to Parliament, bring it back from Brussels, bring it back to Britain. People who fell for that or believed that, fell for's a bit rude, people who believed that very persuasive and emotive rhetoric are now arguing that we need to suspend Parliament because Parliament has too much power. Just think about that for a moment. Why did you vote Brexit? To bring back power to Parliament. Why do you support Boris Johnson's proroguing of Parliament? Because Parliament's got too much power. You see what I said yesterday about two simultaneously contradictory things both somehow surviving in the ether at the moment? Boris Johnson wants an election but doesn't want an election. You see? Now we've got Parliament's got too much power and it's not got enough power. It's really interesting. I've said it a million times to you lately. It's absolutely riveting. As is this question, which I'm going to play in a game type scenario, again in the hope of not leaving anybody listening to the programme feeling alienated or excluded. What we've got with Operation Yellowhammer is a government operation set up in about June, I think, of last year, which was designed to both prepare for and warn about, I think it's fair to say, or maybe warn's already too pejorative, because you don't give warnings about good stuff, do you? You don't say, we interrupt this programme to bring you a warning. Everything's brilliant, and we're all about to get wealthier and safer. You wouldn't do that. A warning, I think by definition, involves some potential negative, doesn't it? So maybe we shouldn't even say warning with regard to Operation Yellowhammer, because so many people still think leaving with a no-idea Brexit is going to be a good thing. Why do you need to warn about a good thing? You see? But that's the only word we've got. So I think it was in June of 2018 that it was set up. It was designed, as we've learned a lot about in the last few weeks, not least because that magnificent consultant neurologist, David Nicholl, who was so foully slandered by Jacob Rees-Mogg in the House of Commons, culminating, of course, in a mealy-mouthed, pathetic apology issued via press release instead of via human contact. Sorry, I digress slightly. What we've learned is that an awful lot of work has been put into it. Now, it's not an act of science. It's not going to be like 2 + 2 = 4. No forecasting can be scientific in its accuracy. But it's all we've got. And while Theresa May was in Downing Street, there was, I think, some valid... No, it wasn't valid. Well, I tried too hard to be accommodating. While Theresa May was in Downing Street, reality deniers could pretend that the reason Operation Yellowhammer was pretty bleak was because this ludicrous notion that Theresa May was secretly trying to frustrate or stop Brexit. Once you've believed one lie, the rest fall into place so easily, don't they? We need to take back control, we need to do this, we need to do that. Once you've swallowed one, everything else is a given. So because Theresa May was... somehow trying to remain or trying to frustrate the ideologically pure Brexit, Operation Yellowhammer couldn't be trusted. And then we got a new government and a new Prime Minister and new updates of Operation Yellowhammer, culminating in Michael Gove lying publicly about the dates, about when the latest versions of Operation Yellowhammer had been concluded, had been put together. An astonishing state of affairs, actually, but again, once one lie is out there, once the country is labouring under one massive lie, all of the little ones fall into place. 12 minutes after 10. A couple of you pointing out quite rightly that it's Orwell, isn't it? It's doublethink, simultaneously entertaining two contradictory notions. My goodness me, he really did plot and map everything, didn't he? So Boris Johnson wants an election and doesn't want an election. For Brexiters, the UK Parliament doesn't have enough power and has too much power. And that leads us this morning to Operation Yellowhammer. 0345 60 60 973. If you had been in a coma, and I apologise if that's insensitive to people who have been or have loved ones in a coma, but I can't think of it. Or if you've been in space. But even in space, you get a radio, don't you? If you'd been in a coma for 5 years... could you explain to that person, so we need to explain to someone who's been in a coma for 5 years, why the government won't release its own investigations into what is likely to happen to this country at the end of next month? That's all, okay? So let's we don't even need to mention Brexit. But at the end of next month, the country is poised to undertake a very, very big change. That's all. Just a big change. Not good, not bad. Not huge, right? Epochal. The government has spent an awful lot of money and time assembling a dizzying array of investigations into what is likely or possibly going to happen at the end of next month. Just think about this, because I know I say this often, but occasionally you really need to register. This is how mad everything has now gone, because the country is in thrall still to one huge lie. So at the end of next month, the country is changing on a scale that has never been seen in peacetime. Potentially, if we do crash out with a no-idea Brexit. The government, this government and the last government, have put large amounts of money, time and effort into collecting information about what might or will happen at the end of next month. But they don't want to tell you. Dominic Grieve's bill passed yesterday, his motion, I beg your pardon, passed yesterday. We'll talk to him a little later this hour. But that's the question. So I mean this. Listen, don't worry. We'll go back to beating up people, metaphorically speaking, at some point this week. But I don't want to do it today. Today, we're all on the same team, okay? We all live in the same country. This person here has been asleep for 5 years. They've woken up to find out that we could be crashing out of the European Union on a no-idea Brexit, no idea about what is going to happen at the end of next month. The government and the last government, both Conservative governments, have got quite a good idea about what is likely to happen at the end of next month, because they've spent a lot of time and money and expertise investigating it. But they don't want to tell you. You can be light-hearted if you want. You can be illuminating if you can. I'll bite your arm off. But the question you need to answer is that, why? So here is someone who's been asleep for 5 years, and they are saying to you, why won't the government tell us what they think is going to happen at the end of next month so that we can get ready for it? And you need to now answer that question, okay? I mean, I can answer it, but obviously, I'm as much in danger of seeing what I want to see as anybody else is. Or not what I want to see, seeing what I desperately don't want to see. But the only answer I can think of is because the public are going to be really, really spooked by it. In which case, you could be forgiven for asking, well, why are we doing it then? So why? Why won't this government tell you what they think is going to happen in the event of a no-idea Brexit at the end of next month? Answer me that question. I'll give 20 pence. To the best. And let me introduce you to Mary. Mary has been asleep for 5 years. She's woken up to find out that we could be crashing out of the European Union with a no-idea Brexit at the end of next month, which has spooked her a little bit, but, you know, not too much, because there's still posh people on the telly telling her that this is a good idea. But she's just learnt about Operation Yellowhammer as a result of Dominic Grieve's motion in the House of Commons yesterday. So she knows that the government has got an awful lot of documentation explaining what they expect to happen at the end of next month. She wants to know why she's not allowed to know. Because forewarned is forearmed, of course. Preparation. Why won't they tell Mary what's in Operation Yellowhammer? Or indeed you. But Mary wants it to be explained in the context of all the stuff she's missed over the last 5 years. 21 minutes after 10 is the time. Tom's in Bishop's Stortford to kick us off. Tom, what would you like to say?
Well, to me, it's quite a simple, straightforward thing. People, generally speaking, are not rational when you give them bad information. So the government fears that there are going to be shortages of certain things, whether it be food, medicine, clothes, so on and so forth. If you start telling people that now, they're going to start panic buying. They're going to start storing things. They'll store petrol. They'll store fuel, and they'll almost become, you know, not crazy, but fearful for their own well-being and good. And
you think it'll be that bad, the contents of Operation Yellowhammer?
Yeah, there was a program a little while ago that some scientists put together about what happens when the systems fail. So you've got no utilities, you've got no police, and that's not
going to be an Operation Yellowhammer, though.
No. But what I'm saying is that it just shows that the society breaks down after about 4 or 5 days. It doesn't take long for people to go into panic mode.
Well, hang on. Why are you telling... You think society's going to break down after 4 or 5 days at the beginning of November?
No. What I'm trying to say, James...
Because remember, Mary's been asleep for 5 years, so she wants you to explain it in the context of what the country's done since she nodded off. So saying humankind is peculiarly susceptible to fear probably isn't going to butter her parsnips.
Probably not, but we've got to explain to Mary that the norms that she was used to when she went to sleep...
Well, that's exactly it. She wants to know why they're no longer there. And what are those norms?
Because our politicians and the people at large have chosen to go on a destructive path. As you said, they've been sold a lie, they've believed that myth, and the reality is they're heading for a crash, but they're not willing to apply the brakes.
But then Mary would say, I think, and I've only just met her, but I think she would say, but if things... I mean, I want to get ready. I want to know what is likely to be... What there might be shortages of. And I understand you're saying some people might panic buy, but they're going to panic buy after it's happened. So I want to be prepared. What's the phrase I'm looking for? There's a proverb, isn't there, or a figure of speech about preparation? I've got it on the tip of my tongue. I can't get it out. So why won't they tell me what I need to know in order to minimise? That's the word that Jacob even used himself, mitigate. You remember when he was being rude to David Nicol on the radio? He said, we've got better mitigators now. So
it will not mitigate the problem, because if I tell you, Mary, you are going to behave like 99% of the rest of the population. You're not going to behave rationally. You're going to behave irrationally, and therefore you're going to exacerbate the very problem that we're trying to avoid.
So they're not going to tell us what's in Operation Yellowhammer because we'll panic.
Exactly. It's the same as the war situation, James. If there was something serious going to happen, we're not going to be given all the information.
No, but if there's an army marching on us, I'd like to know about it.
You might not be told that until it's too late, depending on what their risk assessment and evaluation determines.
Well, this is a very... Poor old Mary, she wants to go back to sleep now.
She's probably better off going back to sleep.
We could all join us. Here we go. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Absolutely.
But we're not allowed to prepare.
James, you know, I'm a little bit older than you, and this is just...
It's a relief.
It just astonishes me where we're going.
Well, me too, although, I mean, I wasn't actually expecting necessarily the echo of my own analysis at this point. I was hoping for something a little more upbeat and optimistic. Poor old Mary. She's only been awake for 25 minutes after a 5-year snooze. She's terrified now, Tom. So why won't they tell you? As a Brexiter, welcome aboard today. Why do you think they won't tell you? Not me, not John Bercow, not Gary Lineker or J.K. Rowling. This government, this Prime Minister won't tell you about what his own government thinks is likely to happen at the end of next month. Why not? 0345 60 60973. And the phone, of course, if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 26 minutes after 10. My thanks to Tom. Andrew is in Reading. Andrew.
Good morning, James. I've rung up to win my 20p.
Well, don't count your chickens or indeed your pennies.
No, I'm not. I haven't got any chickens. But if I did have chickens, I'd be saving the eggs to eat after the panic of the end of the month. OK, so if they tell us what's in Yellowhammer, they open the door to giving us more information about lots of things, like why, when they claim to reduce the deficit, has our overdraft gone up by £2 trillion?
But you already know that.
Well, we don't know that because most of the people that I talk to, yes, but I know it.
Right.
But then there's lots of
So it's
people
not the same as Operation Yellowhammer then, is it? Because you're just an ordinary member of the public.
But what that does is, well...
Not looking good for the 20p, Andrew.
I may well be an ordinary member of the public, but I do look around the edges to find real information as opposed to relying on the sources of the people that have got us in this mess, i.e., or helped to get us in this mess, i.e., paper owners who live abroad.
Yeah, I'm no fan of them, but you have kind of lost me now, because what you're describing is you know, it's accessible via government releases. Listen, I am no fan, as you know, of tax avoiding mega media owners. You can tell by the amount of attacks on me that they sponsor. But that's not what we're talking about today. I promise you can come on the show when we are talking about that. It's not the answer to my question. Why won't they tell us what's in Operation Yellowhammer? Because if they do, we'll ask some uncomfortable questions about the government's own figures regarding the deficit and public spending. That's just a rubbish answer, my friend, isn't it?
Well, I admit that...
Just pause a bit. Take a moment to think about what I said, because it is really rubbish, and I don't want you to embarrass yourself by denying that.
I'm not embarrassed. I've already said...
That's why I said you need to pause for a bit. But I need an answer. Why won't they show Mary what's in Operation Yellowhammer? She doesn't care about the deficit. Why won't they show Mary? She's been asleep for 5 years. What's changed since she nodded off?
Because it'll scare the pants off her, and they'll actually end up having to be honest about this whole situation that the government have
well, then
given.
you're like me, you see. So what we need answers from people that aren't like us. We need answers from people that aren't sneering, condescending Ramonas. Why do they think they're not allowed to know what the government thinks is going to happen at the end of next month?
Because they'll end up having to admit that they've been lying to us.
But it's like 6 weeks away or 7 weeks away. I mean, surely...
Doesn't make any difference to them, James. Doesn't make any difference to them whatsoever. What it means is that the people in positions of responsibility will have to answer questions that they don't want to answer, and they'll have to tell us the truth. And then we'll start asking even more awkward questions, and they'll have to start telling us the truth.
Again, I'll come with you all the way up until that last bit, because the reason why you know the numbers about the deficit and public spending is because they are released by the government. So you can't really use that. I tried to do it. Actually, I'm lying now. I didn't try to do it politely. I did it incredibly rudely, but affectionately, with a smile on my face and my tongue in my cheek. But you can't use stuff that's published by the government as an answer to a question about why stuff is not being published by the government. I don't think you can anyway, unless I misunderstood you, in which case I apologise profusely. Give me a ring. I promise we don't have to have a scrap, but if you're still on board Boris Johnson's bus, not the one with the massive lie on the side, just the metaphorical one, why do you think he won't let you know what's in this document? Because you could just about get away with, it's because there's a Remainer in Downing Street. I mean, I think that's nonsense, and I pity people who've been reduced to lying to themselves in that way, but I can see how it might just have worked. It was just big enough as a fig leaf to cover up the extremities of your intellectual nudity. But now, Boris Johnson's in Downing Street, and he won't let you see what his government thinks is going to happen at the end of next month. Why not? It's 10:30, and it's a tricky question, clearly. Why won't they tell you what's in Operation Yellowhammer? Not me, you, as a lever, actually. I tried to invent a fictional coma recovery patient, Mary, who's been asleep for 5 years, has just woken up to find out that we potentially could be leaving the European Union under a no-idea Brexit at the end of next month. And she knows it's a possibility because there are still people being paid to appear in the public eye, on the media in this country, who are peddling utter falsehoods. And not just falsehoods, but contradictions of the position that they adopted when trying to persuade the people to vote to leave the European Union. You know, people like Farage talking about Norway and Switzerland now claiming that he's been in favour of a no-idea Brexit all along, or some such. So the government, led by the man who led Vote Leave, Boris Johnson, has got these documents called Operation Yellowhammer, which show what the government has been told by its own experts might happen, will happen, could happen at the end of next month. And I really want to know. But I'm a condescending, sneering public schoolboy Ramona, so I'm not allowed to know. You, as a Brexiter, you as a fully paid-up member, and even use that silly word Brexiteer if you want, why won't they tell you what's going to happen at the end of next month? You've been so loyal, you know? Some would argue that you'd sold your soul in order to sustain public faith in this ludicrous project and plan. So there you are, you know, falling out with family members and friends, spitting fury at the radio every morning between 10 and 1. You're on side. You're one of them. Why won't they tell you what's in this document? 0345 6060 973. Beth's in Chesham. Beth, what do you reckon?
Morning, James.
Hello.
I think it's about control. I think that the government know that if they do release this paperwork, all these documents, and come out and say to everyone, actually, this is what the reality is, I think they're going to lose not everyone on their side. I think some people will still turn around and say no, but I think a lot of people are going to turn around and say, hang on a minute, but you told us this, and this.
Do you? Oh, do you know, I can tell you don't do what I do for a living. I gave up on believing that about 6 months ago. You mean you could... But think about the Fifth Avenue line from Donald Trump. You could literally... I had a bloke on the other day telling me how much he likes being lied to. And you,
well, that is true.
But you're presuming still that there is a division to be sown between people who are forced to recognise reality or feel forced to recognise reality and people who still somehow manage to deny it.
I still think there's not everyone. There's certainly quite a few out there that you can tell them anything, and they it doesn't matter how bad things get. They don't care.
Yes, I voted for this. I voted to. I mean, we're probably just a few hours away from people claiming that they voted to lose access to essential medicines. Can we put a more positive gloss on it together, Beth? You and me.
If I'm honest, I'm not sure. I think...
Let's try harder. There must be some answer to this. Why won't they tell us what's in it? Answer in a slightly rose-tinted, positive, Pollyanna-ish light. Because...
Oh, because,
we'd get too excited about how brilliant everything's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of people already mentioned that, there'd be panic buying and things like that, and that is true. That is one reason to hold back the information, but I think...
Well, that could just be the stuff about food supply. They could still tell me what's going to happen in other areas, Yeah, can't panic buy medicines, I don't think, can you, unless you've got prescriptions?
Well, I have no idea anymore. I think everything's been turned completely on its head, so anything is possible.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you're going to win 20p. P is reserved for people that actually provide an answer that isn't negative, that doesn't portray the government or indeed Brexit, a no-idea Brexit, in a bad light. So I'm afraid, Beth, you don't win 20p.
Let me try. So,
yeah, go on then.
Okay, let's put it in a positive light. So the reason why they don't want you to know about Operation Yellowhammer is because that's the worst case scenario. But we're not going to have a worst case scenario because, of course, as they have mentioned time and time again, Brexit's going to be great for this country.
So you don't need to worry about the worst case scenario.
No, that's just, you have to plan for that. You have to plan for the eventuality. But
how can you plan for it? How can you plan for it if you don't know what it is?
Well, the government know more than us, don't they?
Well, apparently
That's
they
how
do.
I did it to Mary.
Yes, poor Mary. I wish I'd never invented
if you want
her
to
now.
try and calm her down, and stop her from having a heart
it's probably really bad, but it might not be as bad as it actually is, but we still can't show you because it is really bad. But it might not be as bad or something.
Yeah, it's not going to be that bad. So, they don't know nobody knows what's going to happen. Even the government don't, which is kind of
There's
worrying.
things you do. I mean, there's a difference between a sort of economic forecast or trying to second guess how cards might fall in the future and understanding what would happen in Ireland if you didn't have regulatory alignment on both sides of that invisible border, understanding what would happen if you had to check every lorry at Dover. So, do you see what I mean? There is a difference between what you'd call evidence-based analysis and forecasts. Forecasts fallible by definition. Of course they are. So, I hear you. But it's not cheered me up, and I'm keeping my 20p in my pocket. Thank you, Beth. 10:40 is the time. Peter is in Ealing. Peter, why won't they tell you?
Hello, sir.
Hello, mate.
What it is, I think, it's like, did you agree with the first Gulf War?
Pardon?
Did you agree with the first Gulf War?
That was the one when we went to support Kuwait after it was invaded by Iraq.
Yes.
I think so, but I was very young, mate. But I think so.
But the point is, the government analysis of that was a 40% casualty rate for the British Army.
Right.
It's worst case scenario, isn't it?
I don't know that it is. And they've said that it isn't.
Well, it is. You always plan for the worst case scenario, so you can always cover yourself.
But how can you cover yourself if you don't know what it is?
But it's like taking out life insurance.
How do you know? How do you know that the government's forecast was 40% of the first Gulf War?
Because we were told.
Yeah,
but we didn't go home and tell our kids or our wives.
No, sorry, just say that again. How did you know that it was 40%? I haven't checked, but I'm taking your word for it. Because you were what? What was that word? Began with T, rhymes with bold.
Oh, we were told.
You were what?
Our CO told us.
You were what?
We were told.
Right. So the question today is, why won't they tell us about Operation Yellowhammer, and you're drawing a parallel with something you were told?
Yes, as we were told, but it's worst case scenario.
Yeah, well, you keep saying worst case scenario, but you can't. I say, why won't they tell us? And you're saying, remember that time they told us.
No, but there's no need for us to know, because this is what they're planning against.
No, but you were told. And my question is, why won't they tell us? And you're saying, remember that time we were told something?
Yes, but the general public weren't told, were they?
Well, I don't know. As I said, I was very, very young, but if I had a mate in the army, I'm sure he would have told me.
Yes, but they wouldn't want...
so it was in the public sphere. It wasn't part of the Official Secrets Act, was it? Or maybe it was?
No, it wasn't.
Well, then it doesn't really work as an answer to this question. Also, for the record, it's not a worst-case scenario, is it? It's what is most likely to happen, I think.
No, it's not what's most likely to happen. They are just working out, like, the worst cases that could happen, and they're putting in plans to make sure...
And why do you think... Well, unless I've misunderstood you, Peter, why do you not want to know what's in it?
Well, it's quite irrelevant, because it's up to them to do counter plans to make sure...
So it includes shortages of fresh... And how will we know if they're doing good or bad counter plans if we don't know what it is that the counter plans are designed to counter?
Because then we won't suffer shortages. They will have plans...
How do you know that if you don't know what the plans are? How do you know that there might be shortages if they haven't told you?
Yes, but that's their job, isn't it? Their job is to come up with what the problems could be, and to come up with solutions how to solve it.
Exactly. And how do we know whether they're any good or not?
Well, we would... because they wouldn't work, but they will work, because...
Well, how do you know they'll work?
Job.
How do you know they'll work?
Because
we had a phone call on the programme last week to Jacob Rees-Mogg from someone who helped write it, and Jacob Rees-Mogg both dismissed him and was incredibly rude to him, and then repeated some worse slanders in the House of Commons and had to issue a pathetic apology via press release.
Yes, and his job was to come up with, that doctor, was to come up with worst-case scenarios.
Not worst-case scenarios, just scenarios.
Yes.
Yes. So again, we're back to this question of if your faith is justified and they're not telling us because we don't need to know, but there are bad things on the horizon that they're putting measures in place to counteract.
Counteract,
yeah. How do we know, as a functioning, transparent democracy, how will we know whether government is acting in our best interest, whether it's put good plans in place? How can we have faith in that when the Leader of the House of Commons publicly insults one of the men that wrote it to such a degree that he has to issue a pathetic apology via press release? Where are you getting your confidence from, Pete?
Well, I just believe you have to believe.
But you're not allowed to believe. Believe got us into this mess. So we can't keep believing, mate.
Yeah, but it's like when you take out life insurance. You don't have to.
You've said that before as well. But if you take out life insurance, you get tested for quite a lot of things to make sure that you haven't phoned up to take out life insurance the day after you got a cancer diagnosis. In your world, they wouldn't tell you about the cancer diagnosis in case you got upset.
Well,
They'd just treat it without telling you, Peter. You wouldn't even know you had it in your world. Do you want to buy a bridge?
Look, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. It's 10:45. MPs in our sovereign parliament have backed a motion calling for the publication of government communications relating to the suspension of parliament. Keep an eye on that. That one's going to run and run. And the disclosure of all documents relating to Operation Yellowhammer. This is the government's contingency plan for a no-deal Brexit. And just to clarify something the last caller said, because this line about it's a worst-case scenario seems to have assumed some momentum over the last few days. It was the Sunday Times, of course, that broke the story. They got hold of the document that had been leaked to them and wasn't out of date, as Michael Gove originally claimed. But a government source later told the Times newspaper, these are likely basic, reasonable scenarios, not the worst case. All the more reason why we should be able to see them. The MP who brought the motion, Dominic Grieve, joins me on the line now. I should begin with commiserations, Dominic, for not being on the resignation honours list. That must have come as quite a blow to you.
I don't think I had any reason to have expectations from the last Prime Minister's resignation.
Very sanguine of you. Onwards and upwards. We're sort of trying to introduce a modicum of levity to proceedings this morning. We're imagining how we might describe to someone who'd been asleep for 5 years why the government won't tell them about their own investigations into what is likely to happen at the end of next month. Could you rise to that challenge, do you think?
I can think of no reason, apart from the fact that it paints a picture on what we have already seen, which is quite contrary to the government's stated view that a no-deal Brexit is an easily manageable matter. Just a few bumps in the road, I think, to take Michael Gove's expression. The Yellowhammer documents we've seen don't suggest it's just a few bumps in the road at all. And you'll recall that a number of people, experts like doctors, who appear now to be disregarded by people like Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg, have said that they believe that the consequences will be very dangerous for people's health, and indeed, in some cases, drugs will not be available, and it could lead to death.
Now, we are in uncharted waters constitutionally, I think, but parliamentary procedure is historically a little bit easier to unpick. Your motion makes this disclosure, they're compelled to disclose by close of play tomorrow, is that right?
Yes, they are. That's the purpose.
And will they?
I don't know.
Right.
And it's right to say that if they don't, unfortunately, with prorogation, the first that the House of Commons will be able to meet to do something about such a failure would be when we come back on the 14th of October. But I don't think one should, as a consequence, underestimate the seriousness of the government's step if they refuse to comply, and I hope that in the next 48 hours they will think better of some of the things that were being said from number 10 yesterday, presumably by Mr. Dominic Cummings.
Oh, I think the phone line has gone down there. Either that or Dominic Grieve was overcome by such...
confrontational...
We lost a little bit there. The line dropped after you said the words Mr. Dominic Cummings, Dominic Grieve, so you may need to rewind slightly.
Hello?
Hello, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good.
Fine.
We lost you after you said the words Dominic Cummings. So
that he seems to come out with just increasingly violent and confrontational statements.
Yes. Well, I probably could have filled in that gap myself, actually. That was and the simpler question of whether or not... You might not want to answer this because it's purely speculative. Do you think they will do what Parliament has ordered them to do?
I very much hope so.
I know you hope so, but I'm trying to push you a little further and whether you're optimistic.
You're going to have to ask them. I think history's shown in the past with these humble addresses that at the end of the day, the House of Commons will get what it asked for, because otherwise the consequences are frankly pretty revolutionary in terms of the executive's relationship with the legislature. But I can see that it may be that we don't get it as we should by 11 p.m. tomorrow, but we'll have to wait and see.
And as I think I've understood you correctly, your hands and indeed Parliament's hands are completely tied in the event of them not doing what Parliament has ordered them to do.
Well, they're tied until the 14th of October, when we get back. Once we're back, then we can do something about it.
Dominic Grieve, many thanks indeed. Actually, before you go, there's the other element of the motion as well, which, of course, it relates to the private exchanges, WhatsApp groups. You probably know, although you may not, that there was an investigation at Newsnight a couple of years ago, and some of the key players now in Downing Street, when they were at the Department of Education, were caught saying, don't use this email account or don't use that email account. So
they were indeed, and they're some of the same players who are currently in Downing Street. And as I pointed out to the Attorney General, official business should be conducted within government on official means of communication. So quite apart from anything else, if this has happened, they all ought to be sacked.
Well, I don't think I'm not going to ask you the question about the likelihood of that happening anytime soon, but I am going to ask you the same question with regard to the prorogation communications. Do you hold out genuine hope that they will all see the light of day?
I think that we will get to the bottom of what has happened, but I do accept that it may be that we won't get everything that we ought to be getting by 11 p.m. tomorrow night.
Fair enough.
And the problem remains about Parliament being prorogued, which is one of the reasons why they prorogued Parliament, in my view, was to try to make sure that we were sidelined from asking legitimate but awkward questions.
People don't fully appreciate... I know Dominic Cummings has said something about you need to stop talking to rich Remainers and get out of London, but that doesn't change the fundamental nature of our parliamentary democracy, does it?
No, it doesn't. And at the moment, the government seems to be quite cheerful to rip up the fundamental framework of our parliamentary democracy, because they claim it's legitimate to do so because the end justifies the means. It can never do so in a democracy.
We've heard that
You have to
rhetoric
operate
before.
within the rules.
Yes, and for people who don't understand, I mean, the Parliament is the check and the balance upon the executive. So for the executive
Exactly.
to suspend the legislature means that they are consciously and explicitly seeking to govern without check or balance.
Precisely.
Right.
And that is, I'm afraid, what's happened.
Good grief. I sometimes say these things myself and think I must be exaggerating slightly. To hear them echoed from a politician of Dominic Grieve's calibre is quite chilling. Many thanks indeed, and commiserations once again, Dominic Grieve, for not finding your way onto that honours list. It appears pretty much everybody who wiped their feet on the doormat at Downing Street has come away with some sort of gong. But the question remains, why won't they tell you what the people who run these operations have told them? It's 10:56. Alan is in Stirling. Alan, what's your answer to that tricky question?
Well, if you can remember, back in the millennium, they had this big thing about the millennium bug.
They did, yeah.
Right? Oh, everything was going to stop, the computers were going to stop, everything.
Yeah.
12 o'clock came, went, nothing happened.
Yeah. Do you know how much they spent on preparation for that?
It was billions they spent.
Do you know how much?
I can't remember offhand, but I did read it.
It was $300 billion then. I mean, in if you were to take inflation into account, then by January of last year, that would have been $436 billion.
Now, this is my thought, right?
So why is that relevant to Operation Yellowhammer?
Operation Yellowhammer it's similar, but it's not similar, if you understand my meaning.
No idea.
Right. What I mean is...
Because I've heard the Millennium Bug parallel before, but it usually falls apart very
experts.
quickly.
All of these experts
Yeah.
that they ask, now, they won't release everything that they say in case...
No, they won't release
nothing
anything.
happens.
They won't release anything.
In case nothing happens or it's not as bad as they say...
But that would be
and
great.
you just get a big red face.
Well, that would be positive. I notice you use, as many people do, it's the fashion, you use the word experts in a slightly negative way. What word would you use to describe the people who worked to make sure that the Millennium Bug didn't cripple the world's computer networks? Because we're saying they were computer somethings. What would be the best word to put after computer to describe the people who essentially spent that $300 billion to make sure that the Millennium Bug didn't cripple the planet successfully? Can we think of a word? Computer amateur? No. Computer ignoramus? No. What's a word for someone who's really good at something? What are you really good at, Alan?
I drive diggers.
Okay, I
drive HGVs.
Are you, I mean, compared to me then, you are, when it comes to HGVs, you are something of an...
Expert.
There we go. So experts are good then, right?
Yeah.
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 Thanks for the call. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where it's fairly clear we're in agreement. It's just some of us are prepared to admit it and some of us are not. The reason why they won't tell us what's in Operation Yellowhammer is that it makes all of their claims of WTO Brexit or no idea Brexit or clean break Brexit look absolutely ridiculous. Why then are they pressing on with this ludicrous course of action, which their own advice tells them is ludicrous and dangerous? Answer: pride, stubbornness, and, quotes, the will of the people, end quote. Which people? People who believed them the first time round. And Operation Yellowhammer would give them the evidence they need not to believe them anymore. So it's not the will of the people. If it's the will of the people, it's the will of the people that they won't tell the truth to. And you can't really trust the will of the people who've been lied to. Hearing from Dominic Grieve a moment ago about the import of the legislature, in our case, Parliament, being suspended by an executive that can't command a majority. Do you know, I think someone told me last night, Boris Johnson has lost more votes now in the House of Commons in 6 days than Tony Blair lost in 10 years. That can't be right, can it? So much winning. Astonishing. And, do you know, I don't like doing stuff like this much, but Dominic Cummings is such a sort of play the ball, not the man kind of character, talking there about getting out of London and don't talk to rich Remainers. I should tell you that does it matter how much his own house costs? I don't know, but his father-in-law owns a castle on which there is a herd of Common Agricultural Policy funded cattle. So whether he's a Remainer or a Leaver, I do not know. But I'm not taking lessons in elitism from a man whose father-in-law owns a castle. It's just absurd. There's nothing wrong with elites. For the record, if it's a meritocratic system that rewards them, sort of, you know, a Sir Robert Winston or actually the author Robert Harris is joining us later today. So expertise being rewarded with baubles is great, but of course, you know, castles are generally inherited. 11:04 is the time. Why won't they tell us? Why won't they tell you what's in Operation Yellowhammer? And why aren't you offended that they think you're so stupid you won't realise the only obvious answer to that question? Of course, your alternative analysis is to make me look stupid by providing, in good faith, another answer that's equally plausible but is not currently obvious to me. Adam's in Chingford. Adam, what do you reckon?
Hello, James. Yeah, for the purpose of this conversation, I am going to talk to Mary. So, as much of a legend of the radio you are,
I'll stay out of it. I'll just stay out of it. Carry on. Here's Mary. Adam, Mary.
Mary, when you fell into a coma 5 years ago, we lived in a country whereby our democratic systems were probably the best around the world, of the highest quality. Now, since you've been in a coma, we now find ourselves in a position whereby the government, we have an unelected government in place, which is run by a bunch of pompous politicians who are, quite frankly, afraid of scrutiny and completely against questions that pose any sort of threat to the rhetoric that they seem to maintain. And that is a reason why they are proroguing government, and that is the reason why they are sort of denying the public almost a crystal ball in order to see what sort of a mess a no deal would plunge this country into. And in my opinion, the Conservative Party at the moment, individually, they care about their own sort of ambitions in Parliament, and collectively, they just care about the Conservative Party. They don't care about the general public. They don't care about the national interest. All they care about is whether or not they're in government. And I pray that when the public is given the opportunity to vote in a general election, we, as the general public, see the likes of Dominic Raab and Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg high up in the gods on the opposite side of the Commons, because that is where they belong. They do not care about the state of the country, and they do not care about what the state of the country would be if they continue down the pathway that they find themselves on at the moment.
Flipping heck. Mary is agog with admiration for your analysis, and so am I, actually. And you've reminded me of something that we've missed, actually, previously, which is, of course, the refusal to release Operation Yellowhammer was in place when they thought they might be able to force a general election before it actually happened, before October the 31st. So it could be that they've ended up in this position by accident, Adam, i.e. they thought if they could keep a lid on it, get an election over the line, increase the majority, then however bad it all turned out to be on November the 1st wouldn't matter, because they would be in for the next 5 years. The worst case scenario under your reading is for the truth to start to emerge before we go to the country, which might explain why they're so cross today about not being able to have the election that last week they insisted that they didn't want to have.
Yeah, 100%. And if Yellowhammer was to come into the public eye, they wouldn't be able to maintain the line that they stand on at the moment. There would be scrutiny. At the moment, with the Yellowhammer documents safely tucked away somewhere, they can maintain that they are for a no-deal Brexit. They are doing what the country wants. They want to get us out of the EU, deal or no deal. But as soon as those documents are published, they will be forced to answer. Well, I say forced to answer questions. There's a prorogation of Parliament at the moment.
5 years ago, they would have been. You're right.
Exactly.
To warn Mary about everything that's sort of crumbled, and then we're left. And this is the other thing we need to explain to Mary. This is the uncomfortable bit. Everything Adam said is true, but some people who, when you fell asleep 5 years ago, you'd have been friends with or colleagues with or even family members, they think that they're in favour of all this stuff that's happening, which is how they're getting away with it, ultimately. And I mean, sadly, half a dozen of them own newspapers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beggars belief, the position that we find ourselves in.
And you're probably like me as you sit there sometimes and you think, well, hang on, it can't be that and it can't be this. And you hear someone like Dominic Grieve, he's a former Attorney General, I think he is.
The thing is, James, I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, anything.
If they release these documents and the numbers were fantastic and it was like, this is going to be fantastic for the country.
Yeah.
I would not be opposed to changing my opinion.
No, of course not.
The bottom line is, I'm not saying that I'm the smartest.
For 3 and a bit
person around,
years,
but
you've been
I've got
asking for
common sense.
tangible benefits. They could be in Operation Yellow. We could finally get those tangible benefits we've been searching for and asking for. And if they were there, you couldn't deny that they were tangible benefits. You'd have to say, oh, well, fair enough. I'll wind my neck in a bit.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, well.
I don't know, James.
Onwards and upwards, Adam. Onwards and upwards.
Yeah.
Keep fighting the good
Take it
fight.
easy, James.
And you, my friend. 10 minutes after 11. 03456060973. You are an effing P word. Leave means leave, and we are going. I mean, don't shoot the messenger, mate. It's not my fault. I just hold up the mirror, and you're screaming at what you see. I've just looked in the mirror that James O'Brien's holding up, and I've seen someone who is cheering while government rides roughshod over democracy, over the legislature, over accountability, and, well, this is awkward. They're treating me like a complete mug. I voted for Brexit, but they won't tell me what's going to happen with Brexit, even though they've got all these experts. Oh, where's Jacob Rees-Mogg when he's not allowed to talk in public anymore. He's been silenced by what he calls the powers that be. Did you see that? He'd been told by the, quote, powers that be that he's not allowed to go to literary festivals. And listen, I've done a few. I've got a few coming up. I should tell you. I mean, it's great fun for me. I've sold more books than I dared to dream of. But poor old J-Dog, his book has sold so few. He should be touring around. He should be taking a wheelbarrow around those literary festivals. Seriously, knocking him out the back. Get one of his kids. Sort of knock him out the back like Rodney Trotter with the old Reliant Robin. But he's been ordered by the, quote, powers that be not to attend literary festivals. It's almost as if the people in Downing Street don't think he can be trusted to speak in public. It's not like he had to issue a humiliating, grovelling apology via press release to a consultant neurologist that he slandered in the House of Commons, is it? That would make... Oh, no, of course he did have to do that. But, hey, you doff your cap, tug your forelock, vote Rees-Mogg. 11:11 is the time. Alex in Leicester. Alec, why won't they let you see what is in Operation Yellowhammer?
Hi, James. Hi.
Hello, mate.
The one thing I'm holding on to, should I say, is the fact that it's that much of a great deal that they don't want to show their hand to the EU. And I know I'm clutching at straws.
Well, you're not clutching at straws. You're taking the mickey, aren't you?
No, not really. I mean, I'm a massive...
So it contains good news?
Yeah.
Right.
A massive, but they don't want to show their hand. If you've ever done a business deal, which I'm sure you have, you never really want to show your big hand, and I think this is their only hand, or they're bluffing their way through, which I'm probably leaning towards.
You are phoning me in good faith.
Yeah, massively.
Clearly.
I mean,
I know. I wasn't sure you were to start with, but you're really overreaching here. I mean, your answer is close to bonkers. They're not telling us what's in Operation Yellowhammer because the news is too good.
Name me a sane businessman, though. They've all got crazy ideas.
Yeah, and where do you stand on the Brexit debate?
Oh, it should never have happened, and everyone was hoodwinked. So
you're trying your best to put on your rose-tinted spectacles and see things that aren't as dire as the facts suggest.
I think we're in that much of a mess that we need to hold back as much information as possible, because if we give too much information away, then the EU will see us for what we really are.
But you know the European... Well, I suppose that is... But the European Commission has published an awful lot of its own no-deal preparedness measures and notices. So we've seen what's going to happen over there.
But we can't share what's going to happen over here because they'll know that we've got nothing. So we need to make them think that we've got something.
I like you, actually. I think that, in the trenches, I would want you next to me, Alec, because you would be describing why rat a la mode is actually a delicious dish. You'd be like Baldrick making me a cup of tea using your own dandruff and saliva and you'd be telling me how delicious it is.
I think we're in a position at the moment where we're polishing a turd, as they would say in sales.
Well, okay. I preferred my analogies with the Blackadder references, but yours was a a little fruitier. It's coming out to 11:15. Unfortunately, I can't comment on whether Alec is correct, and we are indeed polishing the aforementioned item, because they won't even tell us what it is we're supposed to be polishing. That is how dire things have become. And I mean, I'm probably not the best person to do this, but the point at which you go, crikey, God, the people I've been screaming abuse at for 3 and a bit years were actually looking out for me all along. People who actually care about me are the ones that I was told to hate. Oh, Lord. Unless you've got a better answer to the question that we're asking than the ones we've had so far, which is why won't they let you see what they think is going to happen under the no idea or clean break Brexit that these shysters are still punting? It's 11:15.